The Gospel according to St. Matthew, chapter 14, verses 22 to 33. Immediately after feeding the crowd with the 5 loaves and 2 fish, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and precede him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. After doing so, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When it was evening, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat, already a few miles offshore, was being tossed about by the waves, for the wind was against it. During the 4th watch of the night, he came toward them, walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It is a ghost," they said. They cried out in fear. At once Jesus spoke to them. "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said to him in reply, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat and began to walk on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw how strong the wind was, he became frightened, and, beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him, and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" After they got into the boat, the wind died down. Those who were in the boat did him homage, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." There are just 3 points I'd like to make here. One is that we have blessing, then we have trial, followed by blessing and trial. And this pattern seems to follow us through life. In fact, it becomes life, or even the life of faith. The incident here occurs after the multiplication of the bread and the fish, a time of joy, of blessing. Then the disciples have the trial of facing a storm on the sea. Then later on, when Jesus comes, they again experience blessing and peace. So in our life, I believe we often have that pattern of blessings followed by a trial, then blessings leading us on. I think the Lord leads us in that way. Second point I'd like to make is that Jesus, after he feeds the multitude, goes off alone to the mountain to pray. The necessity of prayer in our lives. The action follows the prayer, you might say. Action is important, but it must come out of a prayer life. If we don't have a prayer life, which is the basis of our faith, then we're not going to have action that is faith-based. So, prayer, Jesus goes off into the mountains to pray, and then, of course, he preaches the gospel, he feeds the multitude, and so forth. Thirdly, Peter himself, we see almost doubts from the beginning. "If it is you, Lord," he says. So he's not sure of himself. But at the same time, there is something about him, impetuous you might say, that leads him to investigate whether it is truly Jesus or not. So he has the courage to do that, despite the fact his faith maybe was lacking and maybe he had some doubts. I think in the life of each one of us, we experience these things, blessing and trial. And then also prayer and action, both are necessary. Finally, that we sometimes don't act too quickly, but wait sometimes and think things out a little bit before jumping into the water, you might say. So, that's the lesson we can, and the 3 points I'd like to make. I'm sure there are other things that you yourself can meditate on in this gospel.